This video is about Feliciano's affidavits. Again, this is a summarized version of his 2 sworn statements, and in my new blog post I write about it in a lot more detail, so feel free to check it out there. So Feliciano has given 2 sworn statements, one on April 7th and one an extension on June 24th. On Monday, April 7th, 2014, José Feliciano González made a sworn statement to personnel of the Office of the Municipal Ombudsman of the Boquete district. Feliciano was asked if he knew the young women Chris Kremers and Lisanne Vroon, to which he answered that yes, he saw them on Tuesday, April 1st at the Spanish language school, and he saw them only that day, and it was in the morning. From there, he did not see them again, but that he never spoke to them and only said hello from afar, and this is what he declared. Feliciano was asked if he had been booked as a tour guide on Tuesday, April 1st for Chris Kremers and Lisanne Vroon, and he answered that on that Tuesday he went to the school to take a German couple with him, as well as Marjolein. Quote, that same day, while I was in David at the hospital, they called me and told me that the 2 girls I had observed at the school wanted to go to Mr. Filo's farm in Alto Kiel and that the tour would be on Wednesday, the next day. That's what the person in charge of the school told me, end quote. That was when Feliciano confirmed he'd be at the school on Wednesday at 8 o'clock in the morning to pick them up for the tour. But when he was there the next day, Chris and Lisanne didn't arrive. Feliciano said that he then told Eileen that they should go to that house of Mrs. Miriam Guerra to look for them. They rang the bell many times there without getting an answer. Then they got Miriam's number, and Miriam told them that she didn't know if the girls had arrived back at her home the previous night, that she had been waiting for them until 11 p.m. before going to bed, and that she had left the house early in the morning without seeing them. Feliciano declared that Miriam told him to knock on the windows of the girls' bedroom, which they did, while Eileen called out their names. When they got no response, they again called Miriam on her mobile phone, who then told them where she kept the key of the house and authorized us to enter the house and confirm if the girls were there, which Feliciano and Eileen did. Quote, we did what Mrs. Miriam told us. And there they confirmed that the belongings of Chris and Lisanne were on the bed, but they themselves were not. After that, they, quote, waited all day to see if the girls returned, end quote. They went to the location of the planned tour at Mr. Filo's place and also went to a park ranger's booth to verify if he had seen Chris and Lisanne go up the trail. Neither of them had seen Chris and Lisanne. Then Feliciano and Eileen returned to Spanish by the river, quote, and they never heard from the girls, Feliciano stated. When asked if Chris and Lisanne went on a guided tour with someone else, Feliciano replied that as far as he was told, they didn't, and that they had been looking online for information about the Pianista Trail. Feliciano also declared that Sinaproc had told him that a taxi driver named Humberto Guerra from Unit 4T1117 had dropped them off at the trailhead. Feliciano was also told by Mr. Lazaro, who lives on the trail, that family members of him saw 2 young women walk up the trail around 3 p.m. Feliciano then said he wanted to add that he and Eileen went to the Boquete police station on Wednesday night to report the disappearance of Chris and Lisanne. He ended with saying, that is all, I know nothing more about the facts, and that was his first sworn statement. But there's also an extension of Feliciano's affidavit, and this extension dates June 24 of 2014, and here Feliciano was asked more questions this time. About the hospital visit in David, Feliciano was asked what he was doing on April 1st, 2nd and 3rd of 2014 and with whom, to which Feliciano replied that he had a hospital appointment in David on April 1st and that he had to go there for a cast on his left pinky finger and that he remained at the hospital, quote, until maybe 1 p.m. While at the hospital, Eileen called him, asking him if he remembered, quote, the 2 girls who wanted to go to the volcano on Saturday, end quote, and whether he was free the next day because they wanted to visit the farm of the 2 princesses that was advertised in his brochure. They arranged to meet at 8 a.m. the next morning because you have to give the owner time to get to the farm. He lives in town and not on his farm, quote. Eileen said she was going to ask the girls to confirm and then called Feliciano again to tell him it was confirmed. Eileen liked to join herself and Feliciano told her that she could join free of charge. Feliciano then specified, quote, I arrived in Boquete that same Tuesday in the afternoon. So about this Wednesday tour, Feliciano told now in more detail what happened on Wednesday, April 2nd. He had arrived at Spanish by the River at 8 a.m. and Eileen was already there, waiting outside the school, carrying a small backpack. After speaking for a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, Eileen declared that these girls don't come, because Eileen knew that they were normally punctual. Feliciano declared that he joked that they couldn't be as punctual as Germans, surely. They waited for another 5 or 10 minutes and then both of them got worried. Feliciano declared that he was the one who pushed them to go to Miriam's place then, to look for Chris and Lisanne. So it is good to have that clear now. It was him who pushed for it, according to himself. Feliciano knew Miriam's place, quote, because I commonly look for clients in that house, quote. Then Feliciano basically told the same story of what happened at Miriam's house, the same as what he told in his April 7th affidavit. So they knocked on the door, nobody came out. Feliciano said that he knew Miriam, but didn't have her phone number. And Eileen said then that it was likely that the school had the phone number because the school had the family's contact data info. Eileen was new in Boquete, so Feliciano understood that she was a bit unsure about everything. So then they went back to Spanish by the River to look for Miriam's number, he stated. And in fact, we got it, quote. He then called Miriam and told her that they had been waiting for the Dutch girls for over half an hour, but that nobody came out of Miriam's house. Feliciano declared that Miriam told them to knock on the bedroom door and also where they could find a key to the house. He stated that when they entered the bedroom, they found, to their surprise, only a few things on the beds and a backpack and sandals on the floor. They told Miriam that, quote, the girls were not there and that apparently they had not slept there, which surprised Miriam. Then Feliciano urged Eileen to call Ingrid Lommers, the owner of the school, but Eileen did not want to, he says, as Chris and Lisanne could just have some problems or could have been with friends that night and just hadn't come back yet for some reason. Feliciano then said that he told Eileen that they should report the girls missing with the police, but that Eileen was against this and told him that in Germany they normally waited 24 hours before reporting someone missing. Feliciano also claims that Eileen told him that she saw the girls look at a map the previous day and that they wanted to see the Pianista area. She also told him that she saw the girls on the school computer looking up the Pianista area. She understood what they were saying because Eileen had lived in the Netherlands and studied tourism there, and after they left she didn't see them again. Problem, Eileen later denied all of this in 2020. Then we skip to Feliciano and Eileen's mad Wednesday dash, as I call it. Feliciano told Eileen that they should give the girls a bit of time and see if they would come back by themselves, and so he invited Eileen to come to the farm where they planned to go that day for their tour. Quote, since I know the owner and he could get mad if we kept him waiting. Eileen agreed to this. Then afternoon, Feliciano and Eileen returned to Spanish by the River, quote, and to the house to see if the girls had returned. But alas. He told Eileen to keep an eye out and that he had to go to David to some friend's house and that she could call him. Eileen did call him at 5 in the afternoon to tell him that there was no news about Dutch girls. Nevertheless, Feliciano stated, I told my friends I was going to Boquete immediately. Together they wanted to go to the police station to report the girls missing. Feliciano felt he had to go with Eileen, quote, because the German girl only spoke a few words of Spanish, quote. But then an unexpected delay happened when Feliciano left his car key in his vehicle and they had to wait for family to bring a reserve key, and while waiting they decided to go for dinner together. Back at the police station, this information was used to file the complaint. The police officer recommended to Feliciano, or so he declared, that he should go to Sinaproc the next day, Thursday, and give them the same information, which he did. He told Eileen to stay at the language school on Thursday, and Sinaproc then called Feliciano to tell him that he should come by the next day for them to receive his missing persons report. So then we skip to Thursday, Sinaproc day. So on Thursday he went to Sinaproc and gave them the information, like he says he had been asked to. A policeman then called him to say he should pass by the ombudsman's office to give them the information as well. Sinaproc then said they were willing to, quote, accompany Feliciano, if necessary, to look for the girls on the Pianista trail, and they agreed to start the first search together. Feliciano went on to describe this search he did on his own that day. He described how he interviewed local resident Mr. Lazaro by himself and by his own initiative. He saw 2 women go up the pianista trail on Tuesday, but not come down again. One wore shorts, the other he could not see well from his position. Other people also told Feliciano that they had seen 2 girls go up the trail on Tuesday, but that they had not seen them come down either. Feliciano then went directly to Sinaproc to tell them the information he gathered and show them which points on the map he had already visited and searched himself. He told them that he would be available to help them again on Friday by noon. Feliciano was then asked by the interviewer if he made himself available to Sinaproc to initiate a search for the Dutch girls, or if he was asked to do so. He said that he made himself available, but that they never contacted him to ask him to participate in any search. Feliciano declared that he went up to the area of Alejandro Pitti by himself, as the Sinaproc man who would accompany him was called back. Quote, "I clarify that during that trip I didn't find anyone to ask if they had seen anyone around that place." Quote. So he just told that he spoke to Mr. Lazaro, but apparently now he didn't meet anyone. Or maybe he meant a different area here. When he was asked what roads exist to get to the mountain range that connect with the Culebra community, Feliciano answered, "There is only one way, which is the Pianista. There is no other, and that is the one you use." Feliciano confirmed that he got paid for his tour guide work and that he had been working in this field for 14 years at that time, and I've never had a problem with anyone. When asked where and with whom he was on June 18 and 19, 2014, Feliciano replied that he was in Alto Romero. When asked what he was doing those days, he replied that the Dutchman, Mr. Geronimo, which was Jeroen van Passel, I think, asked his services for the families, given that he knew the Culebra River and the area where the backpack was found well. Feliciano confirmed to have owned property in that area for over 35 years. He said he wanted to help from the beginning in order to, quote, "find out what really happened, since it's part of my job," and other quote, "also because I had my property in that area, I was concerned about what was happening," quote. Feliciano asked the help of Mr. Laureano Bejarano and his own brother, José Domingo González. Feliciano stated that he asked Geronimo straight up if this collaboration could cause any misunderstandings with the authorities or the prosecutor's office, as he could see how they might perceive this as interference. Geronimo had replied that there was no problem, that the authorities were aware of this, and Geronimo asked them also to search further downstream from the point where the backpack was found, and then further upstream, which is what they did. When questioned if he realized that authorities from Sinaproc, the public prosecutor's office and the national police as well as Senafront were in that area, and if he thought that the conduct of his search could cause or generate any kind of doubt or error in the activities carried out by the authorities, Feliciano replied no. Whenever authorities started their own search, which they could do whenever they wanted, he said, Feliciano himself could simply leave that same day, he stated. And despite taking tourists to the monkey bridges quite regularly, Feliciano stated that he barely visits his property in Alto Romero, only 2 or 3 times a year, because, quote, he is afraid of the river crossings or the cables, which are dangerous, and I have an indigenous person who looks after my property. So then we go to some thoughts and commentary. This was the second affidavit, and I had some time to reflect. And basically, to me, it reads like, just as Marjolein did, Feliciano had a list of excuses, basically. For instance, he mentions Eileen as the one who had emphasized on Wednesday morning that those girls don't come, as they were normally punctual. But it was Feliciano himself, actually, who pressed for them to go to Miriam's house to look for Chris and Lisanne there. And yes, he went into Chris and Lisanne's bedroom without police presence, but he did so because, quote, we did what Mrs. Miriam told us. And in there he sensed and just knew that, quote, the girls were not there and that apparently they had not slept there, end quote. And he pins that knowledge on the sight of only a few things on the bed and a backpack and sandals on the floor, which to me makes no sense. Feliciano wanted Eileen to call Ingrid immediately to tell her about the disappearance, but it was Eileen who objected and blocked this, he says. Feliciano says that he was the one who told Eileen that they should report the girls missing with the police, but that Eileen was the one who kept them from doing so right away. Feliciano was flagged as suspicious by police for being the only one who knew that Chris and Lisanne had hiked the Pianista trail on the day of their disappearance, but Feliciano has a scapegoat ready. He claims that Eileen told them that she saw and overheard them discussing their Pianista plans. Only Eileen later denied all of this in 2020 and said she had no idea what Chris and Lisanne's plans were. Feliciano also decides to monopolize Eileen all day on Wednesday, I feel, taking her away from her workstation to the farm. But this time Mr. Philo gets the blame. Quote, "Since I know the owner and he could get mad if we kept him waiting." Feliciano wants to report the girls missing at the police station, even though it really is not his place to do so, but he blames it on Eileen again. Feliciano felt he had to go with Eileen because the German girl only speaks a few words of Spanish. Then, despite already taking Eileen from her work all day, he also had dinner with Eileen that day, but a new excuse is found there. He had left his car key in his vehicle and they had to wait for slow family members basically to bring a reserve key, and that's why they also went for dinner. When he and Eileen went back to the girls' bedroom in the evening to look for ID, they again did so without police present, but this was their own fault as, quote, "there was no officer available to join them." And you'd think he had no place to interfere with Sinaproc's investigation the next day, but Feliciano has an excuse ready again. The police officer told him to do so, to give them the same information, which he did. A policeman then called him to say he should pass by the ombudsman office as well to give them the information, explaining why he became an informant there also, basically. Feliciano overstepped the line, one could say, by interfering with Sinaproc's search operations and by going up the Pianista alone without them present, but he blames this on Sinaproc, who had been called from higher up to stay put after initially telling him they were willing to accompany Feliciano, his own words. So now they are aiding him, the hero, instead of the other way around. And Feliciano's excuse for being involved in virtually all the wilderness searches that led to discoveries of the girls' remains is that the Dutchman, Mr. Geronimo, Jeroen van Passel, asked his services for the families, given that he knew the area well. I mean, this is probably all correct. It's just, it reads like one long excuse of, everyone else told him to do everything. So, next point, Geronimo also was the one to blame for asking them to search further downstream from the point where the backpack was found and then further upstream. Again, this is all someone else's request. Feliciano's excuse for leading the Alto Romero searches and basically being the one to find most of the girls' remains was, quote, "to find out what really happened since it's part of my job. Also, because I had my property in the area, I was concerned about what was happening," quote. Feliciano was aware that this collaboration could cause misunderstandings with the authorities and the prosecutor's office, who could see it as him interfering with the official investigation and searches, but that Geronimo had replied that there was no problem and that the authorities were aware of this. So a few things from the first affidavit that I like to highlight here now. So when Feliciano was asked if he knew Chris and Lisanne, he replied on April 7th, "Yes, I saw them on Tuesday the 1st of April of this year, and I saw them at the Spanish and English school only that day, and it was in the morning," quote. As I already explained in the video about Marjoleine's letter, his statement is very specific in that he saw the two that morning, but nobody else told police that Feliciano was present at the language school on Tuesday morning or that he saw Chris and Lisanne there. Marjolein and Eileen did not mention it at all. Only Feliciano told police this by his own accord, and only in his first affidavit on April 7th. He did not mention this in his June 24th extended affidavit, so why is this? And why did he in later media interviews try to backpedal on this, saying he never saw the girls? So Feliciano says some contradicting things about this supposed fleeting meeting with Chris and Lisanne on Tuesday morning, while also declaring he didn't return from David until well after noon. He believed he left the hospital around 1 p.m, meaning he would be back in Boquete close to 2 p.m. And when he left Boquete that morning, it was around 7 a.m, according to Marjolein in her letter, when the girls were still at Miriam's place. You can't help but ponder about possible motives for saying all this. It is perhaps in order to explain to police why he was so involved and motivated in chasing after Chris and Lisanne on Wednesday, also over the next days. But in any case, it just baffles me that nobody in this investigation ever went after that admission of his. No cross-examination of Eileen and Marjolein in that respect, no follow-up questions, no inquiring with Feliciano at what specific time he saw the girls at the school, or how this would fit in with the timeline of his hospital visit in David, and whether he lied to them therefore. Just nothing. No pinging of his phone either, no tracing of his footsteps. He could just jabber on for as long as he wanted, it feels, and then decided to have the interview ended. Just like police and investigators never went after the Eileen lies regarding the 1 p.m. last sighting at the school. So another one, Feliciano declared on April 7th when asked if he ever spoke to Chris and Lisanne. No, just a hello from afar, that was all. So I'll add a photo, but this just begs the question of how far away he was then when he passed by them, because we know from old documentation that Spanish by the River was surrounded by a big fence in 2014. Almost the whole area was blocked off by tall wooden gates, so it was not as simple as seeing them passing from the public road. He would have had to enter the premise for that, and why was he there? Fails to explain that as well. Feliciano stated on April 7, that same day while I was in David at the hospital, they called me and told me that the 2 girls I had observed at school wanted to go to Mr. Filo's farm in Alto Kiel, and the tour would be on Wednesday, the next day. So the girls he had just observed at the school. Again, it's astonishing how nothing said in these statements was ever followed up by police. Here he gives a lengthy statement which, while elsewhere less than 3 hours later, Eileen gives another, because they were interviewed on the same day then and close together, with some answers that seem to directly contradict what he is saying here, and yet no one notices the various contradictions and the evasiveness. Or is Feliciano setting up a false narrative here perhaps to cover up that he was in fact returned to the school after coming back from David after his doctor's appointment? I mean, where was Henry at this point, his son? Was he at Nelvis? Is this perhaps the moment when Feliciano himself learned from Chris and Lisanne that they had plans to hike the Pianista Trail that day? And why Eileen later denied having known about their Pianista plans, despite Feliciano claiming she told him so in his sworn statements, allowing him to inform Henry about this. I mean, that would line up with what Murgas, who was murdered, stated to the police about Henry telling him in a pool hall that he had arranged to meet the Dutch girls for a trip to the Pianista Trail or the Baru volcano to spend the night with them and enjoy the sunrise, and that he was the last person to see them. By the way, I received various emails early on from people from Boquete who confirmed that he was overheard in a bar saying he was the last person to have seen them alive. So I mean, it could all be nonsense, but it is quite a persistent rumor, I would say. It doesn't make it true, but noteworthy. So, true or false, if Henry truly was the last person to see them, then it must have been either at Nelvis or up the Pianista Trail. And Nelvis, Café Nelvis, is where Chris and Lisanne went on Tuesday morning, according to the book Lost in the Jungle, after having been at Spanish by the River and before heading to the Pianista Trail. So this is just a theory, but if that is true, then why did Eileen lie about all this for April 1st? So he interviewed the Pianista residents on his own behalf, also because he thought the authorities were not on top of it right away. Feliciano paints himself a bit as a hero of the story, instead of acknowledging what police saw as a potential person of interest trashing through a potential crime scene without police present, taking over police duties by starting to interview witnesses, living on the trail without being asked to do so, interfering with the searches, steering the investigation. I mean, he was the one who said that they were up the Pianista, taking over the media coverage with his early stories about that they must have been on monkey bridges and fell into the river. But when you even point this out, some people will really start to scream victim shaming and he was a hero. But it has to be pointed out. While they failed to explain why he showed so much initiative and interference for 2 girls he had never truly met, nor had any reason to feel any form of responsibility for. And even the location of the backpack was flagged as suspicious, relatively close to his finca and found by the workers of his brother. Or maybe he simply likes to feel important and be at the center of the action, that's also possible. Feliciano stated on April 7th, the girls were not there and apparently they had not slept there, which surprised Miriam. So this comment of Feliciano still makes no sense to me, to be honest. Chris and Lisanne had left those beds in that way when they left the house on Tuesday morning, after they had just slept in there. So how can Feliciano determine anything by the state of those beds? Come Wednesday, he had no ID, supposedly, that they hadn't returned that night prior. Not even Miriam knew that with certainty, but Feliciano now uses this knowledge to further dig into his search for the women and to elbow his way into the investigation, with the best of intentions, of course, but... So then I come to the second affidavit and some thoughts and commentary on there. I'll try to do this as fast as possible. So Feliciano stated on June 24th, on April 1st, which fell on a Tuesday, I had an appointment at a regional hospital because they had a cast on my left pinky finger. I was in the hospital until maybe 1 p.m. So in his second sworn statement, Feliciano introduces this 1 p.m. time, effectively putting himself out of the way of being anywhere near the school or bouquet at the time when Eileen declared to have last seen Chris and Lisanne there, which was a lie, it turned out. But this wasn't yet clear by June 24th, so in his April 7th sworn statement he did not provide the 1 p.m. time, but did swear that he told everything he knew. But 11 weeks later he remembered a lot more details though. Feliciano stated on June 24th, that day, while I was in the hospital, I received a call from a young German woman. She tells me, Feliciano, it's Eileen, from school. Do you remember the 2 girls who were going to the volcano on Saturday? So this statement indicates that Eileen saw and spoke with Chris and Lisanne on the morning of Tuesday, April 1st, and that they made plans together for a joint Wednesday tour with Feliciano. So Eileen must have therefore seen it if Feliciano indeed interacted with Chris and Lisanne at the school that morning. She said nothing about this though. And Feliciano also phrases things differently this time than he did 11 weeks earlier. So now he describes Eileen as saying during a call to him while he was in the hospital, do you remember the 2 girls who were going to the volcano on Saturday? But back then, he said, they called me and told me that the 2 girls I had observed at school wanted to go to Mr. Philo's farm in Alto Kiel. So does Feliciano no longer want to stick to this observation detail now suddenly, or why does he phrase it so differently? He leaves out the fact that he saw Chris and Lisanne at the school entirely from his June 24th second affidavit. Feliciano stated on June 24th, she says she was going to ask the girls to confirm and then she calls me and tells me it's confirmed. So this statement also indicates that Eileen saw and spoke with Chris and Lisanne on the morning on Tuesday, April 1st. If only we knew when exactly these phone calls took place that morning. I mean, we know that the girls were told to come to the school at 9 a.m. from Marjolein. We know he went to David with Marjolein around 7 a.m. that Tuesday morning, also from Marjolein. We know he didn't return from that hospital until after 1 p.m. per his own statements. So even though he claimed to have seen Chris and Lisanne at the school that morning at some unknown time, how does it fit in? And without wanting to sound skeptical about everything, I do have a slightly hard time believing that Feliciano was at that local hospital in David from effectively 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. for a simple pinky cast. It doesn't take that long to get a cast or bandage removed. I remember that Adelita Corriat, a journalist, published an article at the time in which she wrote that Feliciano and Henry were already behind the Pianista trail at the beginning of Tuesday afternoon, tending to their cattle. So it's curious where she got that information from, and to publish it in a newspaper she may have had good sources. Feliciano stated on June 24th, we spoke for a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and she told me that these girls don't come. They are punctual. Another few minutes passed, maybe 10, and we were both getting worried. So after only 10 minutes of chit-chatting, maybe 15 in total, panic totally engulfed Feliciano and Eileen. Eileen is never mentioned in Chris and Lisanne's diary. She basically only properly met them on the bus ride to Bouquet or at Spanish by the River, and this was their first day of doing something together, supposedly. So Feliciano also never before had tourists who failed to show up for a tour date. Does he always get panicked and start searching the rooms if some unknown tourists miss their time slot? Despite Feliciano trying to say in his sworn statements that he had no idea who these 2 young women were, and in his additional affidavit that he never met them, this man then goes into a panic within 15 minutes of waiting, barging into their private room, pushing Eileen to call Ingrid, none of his business, dedicating his entire Wednesday and then the days after it to look for them, to tourists who simply missed their agreed pickup time. Not even Miriam was worried, and mixing himself into the investigation. I mean, what outsider does that in a delicate case picked up already by the country's prosecution and professional organizations? Why do we have to see this as heroic? Feliciano stated on June 24th, yes, I made you a map of the place I traveled through as a sketch, and in addition to some of the photos that were shown on TVN, I took them. So Feliciano is the star reporter and investigator. It is likely that Feliciano also took the photos of the boot of Lisanne, perhaps, locked behind a tree, and a photo of the backpack and the contents shown on local news. He took the photo, so everything's possible. Did he accept money for those images? Feliciano stated on June 24th, "Yes, I was in Alto Romero in the province of Bocas del Toro on June 18 and 19, 2014. Feliciano stated that he rarely goes to his Alto Romero finca, only 2 or 3 times a year, because he's afraid of the monkey bridges he has to cross to get there, despite paying customers to those same monkey bridges regularly. But what are the odds that he was actually there in Alto Romero a few days after the backpack was discovered by employees of his own brother, if he only goes there 2 or 3 times a year normally?" I mean, this was before the searches in that area started. That was after the backpack was found and they wanted to find more. So I'd like to know if Feliciano was also in Alto Romero around the 11th of June when the bag was discovered. And the interviewer is very specific in the question with regarding to the 18th and 19th of June specifically, why he said. Don't forget here, by the way, that Feliciano himself acknowledged in interviews how vitally important that bag discovery truly was. To the NOS News on June 25th, 2014, for instance, Feliciano repeated throughout the interview that it was very good luck that the backpack was found, because without it, we wouldn't have known anything about the fate of Chris and Lisanne. And a good question from Power Pixie about that statement. Well, since we know what photos were on the camera without proof they were dead, and the phones still had to be examined at that time, how could you know what their fate was just going by the backpack? Cat Feliciano also made an effort to tell the public through media interviews that his backpack discovery could end any and all speculations and rumors about foul play. By June 16th, the parents of both missing young women had still openly expressed hope to find them alive, even after the discovery of the backpack, but Feliciano knew enough at this point. He told it in the media as well, and we will never know what exactly made him believe this. What's more, after on-camera tears of him about the authorities not doing enough for these girls and over the sad state of the investigation, he now radically changed his tune once his brother's employees found the backpack. Quote, "I think that you shouldn't take any risks. With what we have found at that point, we knew that nobody was alive anymore." Feliciano called for further searches to stop immediately because it was too dangerous suddenly. So it is a bit contradictory, and there was nothing in that backpack that proved they were dead. Why suddenly? It's just in the media all the time. It's noteworthy, that's all I'm saying. So, last little bit of conclusions. Overall, Feliciano's first affidavit seems more restrained, but in his second he shows what a good storyteller he is basically, and this in stark contrast with the bare minimum of information coming from Eileen in her affidavit coming next. The police interviews were all very curt, clearly following a pre-written textbook question list. There was very little curiosity, I feel, little prodding of the people being interviewed, which was disappointing to read. It is not clear if the extension of Feliciano's sworn statement was given because he was summoned to do so, for instance because authorities had new questions about his role in things, or because Feliciano himself requested to. In his second affidavit, Feliciano chose to leave out his sighting of Chris and Lisanne at the school on Tuesday morning. At no point did Feliciano suggest to Eileen that instead of invading these girls' privacy by going into their bedroom without police present, they should simply first try to call them on their cell phones. I didn't find any of that information in either of the affidavits. So there you have it. This is the coverage of both his affidavits and both what he said himself and a little bit of commentary from me, which you do not have to agree with, of course. This man is innocent of anything. There's never proven that he was involved in anything related to the disappearance of Chris and Lisanne. But we know so many details about this case now. It is fine to look at things critically, but just keep in mind that everyone is innocent until proven otherwise, and there's no proof this man had anything to do with the disappearance. Thank you.